Good morning and welcome to All Things Aviation. My name is Vince Mickens with the Private Air Media Group. Great show we're looking forward to today. It's going to be pretty cool because in a few hours, we're going to be landing, well, I'm not going to be, but Jet Propulsion Laboratory and NASA are going to be landing the Perseverance Mars rover on Mars. It's now just a few hours away from there. It's been a 7-month journey. And of course, everybody's very excited about it because some of the technology that we'll be talking about today that's involved with that project, that mission, is actually pretty impressive stuff. And I just think the excitement of it at this time. I think one of the things that was talking about this last week kind of sparked this show because I really didn't think I was going to be able to pull off having some guests about today's event on the day of the event. But, miracles do happen. So, but last week we had Dr. David Page. He's a UCLA professor in the Department of Earth, Planetary, and Space Planetary. I did that last week too, Earth, Planetary, and Space Studies. He's also the RIMFAX Deputy Principal Investigator for the Perseverance. RIMFAX stands for, it's an acronym for Radar Imaging for Mars Subsurface Exploration. And we had Anais Zarafian. She is a systems engineer specifically for the Perseverance. And then we were hoping to have from the Deep Space Network, Dr. Joseph Lazio, who's the chief scientist and the Interplanetary Network Directorate for the Deep Space Network, but he got called to a meeting at the very last minute. So I was very fortunate to have Anais and Dr. Page on. And as Dr. Page put it, we were pretty excited because of the fact that we're seeing the excitement in aerospace and in space exploration like we haven't seen in decades. Now, people like our young guest, Naia, she would have not even been around at that time, more like a thought, but I'm sure our other guests are familiar with what I'm talking about, and that's the excitement of space exploration back in the day that is now exciting again with all of the things that we're doing with this mission and upcoming mission regarding the moon, et cetera, and all of the other things, and Jupiter and things like that. So pretty exciting stuff. And we had a really great show last week. So I said, I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to try to pull this off and see what I can do. And while I'm mentioning that, I should also thank NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory Digital News and Media Office. There were several individuals there that were very helpful with and very patient with me with trying to secure guests for me and help me out to be able to do this today. So I want to do a shout out to Kala Cofield, Ian O'Neill, DC Agile, and Matt Siegel. All of them were instrumental in helping move things forward. And of course, our first guest is the person I should thank the most because he kind of got the ball rolling when he said, "Yep, I'm available. Yep, we're busy, but I'm available." So our first guest is Eric Aguilar. Eric does a lot of things actually at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He is a senior engineering manager. He also is the assistant delivery manager of sampling. Is that caching?
Yeah, caching.
Caching system of the sample caching system. And he is the system testbed manager for the Perseverance Mars rover. So Eric, welcome to the program, and thank you again for making yourself available at such an exciting time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Vince. This is great. Yeah, I'm super excited to talk with everybody today.
Well, and we're super excited to have you. Next, we have the privilege of having Dr. Glenn Lightsey, who I was teasing earlier because I was like, Lightsey, Lightspeed. But actually, Dr. Lightsey is with the Georgia Institute of Technology, better known as Georgia Tech. Dr. Lightsey is the director of Space Systems of the Space Systems Design Lab, which is part of Georgia Tech's Center for Space Technology and Research. Dr. Lightsey, did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in the School of Aerospace Engineering at Georgia Tech.
Great. Well, thank you for last minute availability to join us today.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. which brings me to our shining star. And that was actually a term, Dr. Lightsey, you used just prior to us going live. We have a guest today. Her name is Miss Naia Butler-Craig. Naia is a PhD candidate, ironically, at Georgia Tech. Hey, this wasn't planned. It just worked out that way. Small universe. But Naia is working on her PhD, as I mentioned, in aerospace, aeronautical, and astronautical space engineering, which involves the high power electric propulsion lab. She got her undergrad in all of the above at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University down in Daytona Beach. And she was a graduate research fellow at NASA Space Technology. And then we could go on and on and on because she's been quite the busy young lady. Naia, it's great to have you join us today on such a momentous day.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to share the panel and the platform with such awesome folks. So I'm excited.
Yeah. So and it's funny, you and Dr. Lightsey are familiar with each other in terms of he's familiar with what you're on your quest to do and the things that he has done and is doing at Georgia Tech.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to start out though with Eric, because Eric, again, it's really great to have you. Let me just ask you, what's it feel like today? And we were talking to you before the show, and you said, "Oh, well, I've done this 3 times before, so 3 or 4 times." So what's today like for you with the latest rover going to Mars, with all of the new technology, and with your intricate work on it?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, Vince, right? This is my third mission, 4th rover to land on Mars, or the attempted landing, right? So my first rovers were the Mars Exploration Rover, Spirit and Opportunity. That's when I started my career at JPL, and it was exciting then, and it's more I'll say not scared but anxious, right? It's you've put a lot of work, a lot of years into these developments, and a lot of time spent, and then you get down to this, from
to the wire.
Down to the wire. You get from the top, from entry from entry to touchdown at 7 minutes. That's
got to be the toughest. You can do this stuff for years, and you can have the 7-month track of it launching and going there. Yeah. But the last 7 minutes is the most critical. I've just heard that over and over.
Right. It comes down to that, right? And it's that time, and the way that, the distance from Earth to Mars, right? It's an 11-minute one-way light time. So by the time it hits that, by the time we know that the signal said, "Hey, I'm entering the atmosphere," it's done. It's on the ground. Hopefully in one piece, right? And that's the idea. Right. But it's on the ground. Right. So, you get that whole time. Now you're just waiting, and you're hoping to see that everything's ticking away as expected. Right. So, it doesn't get easier. It feels like.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've watched a ton of videos in the last few weeks. It's funny. You guys actually put out a lot of information. I say you guys as in Jet Propulsion and NASA and Caltech, et cetera. There's a ton of information about this in terms of details of the building of the rover and the testing of it and the testing of the different components of it and things like that. So it really draws you in. I mean, it's one of those things where I was looking at a video the other night on our kitchen computer or whatever, and before I knew it, everybody else was gathering around going, "Hey, what's that? That's really cool." So it's pretty exciting. I've got some other questions to ask you about. A whole bunch of questions. I could do a show just with you, Eric. But before I do that, I'd like to also get the feel from Dr. Lightsey about today and about this whole project and how excited you are for what you do and teach at Georgia Tech.
Yeah, these are great days. These are sort of like community days where we all come together and sort of celebrate the space program. These launch and landing days. I think that's one of the things that's really nice. Eric mentioned that about space projects is kind of there is that ultimate day where it either works or it doesn't work, right? And we're all watching, and it's a community event. So it taps into like our collective consciousness, and it's very inspirational. So that, to me, that's why one of the reasons I got into the space program is just the drama and the excitement of those flight opportunities. So here we are, we're kind of reaching the culmination of this journey to get this rover on the surface of Mars. We're going to make all these amazing discoveries. And it's a great moment to just kind of take stock and say, wow, we've really come a long way, and celebrate that. So
sure. Does it help you with the students? Do they get inspired by events like this, where
yes,
all of the things that they've been learning now are kind of coming to fruition, at least in terms of what's going on with a project like this?
sure. Yeah, it really it helps our students. They all participate and watch, and I think it inspires them to get their homework assignments done and things like that. We were just talking in my class about interplanetary trajectories, and we can talk about Perseverance as a case study of that. So it's really
Naia, I saw you shaking in agreement. So, and as a PhD student studying all of the above, how's this stay to you?
It's I think Dr. Lightsey hit the nail on the head there. It definitely puts into perspective everything that we've been doing. When you're in grad school or in school in general, you're knee deep in the research or the classwork, and you kind of forget the bigger picture. And it's these days that kind of remind you kind of what you're working toward, and that it's not just, the projects that you're doing in class or in school or trying to get an A. You could actually eventually contribute to amazing technological feats such as what we're doing today. So
one of the questions that I get every show, and it's probably the most popular question, is how'd you get into it? How'd you get started? So, but what's fun today is I can do this with you, Naia. How did you get into aviation? I mean, into aerospace? When did this spark happen? How young were you? What made it obvious that this was a direction? Because you're like, we were talking about it before the show, Dr. Lightsey, and we're talking about you're everywhere. Your name is everywhere. And if it has anything to do with space, and you were talking about your aspirations to become an astronaut, you're all over it. So where did that come from?
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite questions, because I think I have an interesting kind of background. No one in my family has ever done aerospace, and I never had that exposure from young. But I think I was around 7 years old when I kind of showed that I was very interested in engineering. And that was shown by the fact that I drew a car, and I drew the underbody of that car, and I was sure it could run on oxygen. I don't know how I knew. I just knew that this car would be able to run on anything but fuel. And then I think another instance after that, which is a story my mom loves to tell, is I learned about the water cycles recently, and then I was running out of the shower because I saw the condensation on the mirror, like screaming at my mom, the water cycle's happening in our bathroom. And I was just so fascinated by that. That's her favorite embarrassing story to tell. And so I'm stealing her thunder right now. But that was from very young.
It's a great story.
Thanks. It's very on brand for me. But it wasn't until 8th grade that I took a class called Earth Space Science. And that's when I learned about space.
Okay.
It was like the phases of the moon, just how vast space is. And I just found myself very intrigued by how mysterious it was.
So your last year of middle school that's when it really, you were able to start putting it together.
Yes. And I learned I like science, I like engineering, and I like space. And so I took a PERT test that told me I was supposed to be like a veterinarian. I didn't like that answer. So I researched what I liked, which were those 3 things. And that's how I discovered aerospace engineering.
Gotcha. So I'll come back to you, Dr. Lightsey. Your experience in terms of teaching and your involvement with all of these students and everything. What are some of the things that come to mind right away with you that make students that are interested in space exploration and aerospace a standout?
Yeah, aerospace is an interesting field because I think most people that choose to go into it, it's really a passion project. Like you love this idea of being able to fly in the air or being able to go to places we've never been before. And this whole idea of humanity and just expanding our knowledge and our ability to go out and do things as a world. And once you buy into that, you sort of never look back, really. And most of our students, they're not in it for money or and honestly,
What?
it's a hard path. Yeah, right. It's a hard path because you have to work hard and learn, and it doesn't get easier, but you do it because you love it, right? You do it for love, and it's great to share that. You know, when I talk to students about that, it's something we all have in common. We can relate to one another through our love of the subject and what it means for our world, basically.
Wow. That's pretty impressive to hear you say that it's more for the love and the passion than for the dollar. That's a really great point to bring up, because we always hear, and it's a diversion from what we normally hear, which is that kids are looking for that, you know, next thing. Although I have to say, including raising 3 daughters myself, today kids are looking for purpose as well as anything else. So they want to find something that they can really sink their teeth into and feel good about it. And yes, it would be nice to get paid, but it isn't necessarily at the forefront. Eric, I'm going to come back to you and ask you some questions. I actually am getting bombarded about, when are you going to talk about the helicopter? In a minute. I want to talk about the Rover first. I just named several things that you do, Eric. So can you tell us a little bit more specifically about your job there and what your experience has been working on the Perseverance?
Yeah, sure. So I have, as you mentioned, 2 titles, right? And you know, they're I would argue both full-time jobs, but I was able to split my time. I think one of my project manager mentioned, it's, you know, even though it's 50%, you got to look at what the denominator is, right? That's how, you know, how big that number really is. Then you can see how much work he's really putting in. And so, you know, it was a lot of hours and a lot of work, but for the sample caching system, right? My job was the system engineering. So so we're a fairly big subsystem, right? We have about almost half of the actuators that are on the rover are part of the sample caching system, and it's sort of the I'd argue one of the reasons we're going to Mars, right, is to actually collect and cache these samples.
So we have people that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have people that aren't familiar with certain technical terms. Can you tell us what a sample caching system is?
Oh, okay.
I want to let everybody know it's caching as in CACHE, not CASH.
Yeah, right.
ING.
Yeah. So the rover has, you know, obviously we have a rover that can drive around. It's a geologist, right? It can drive around. It has a mask for vision, you know, hazard avoidance cameras. But one of the things that we have is what we call the sample caching system. And it's a robotic system on the front end of the rover that consists of a robotic arm, a 5-degree of freedom robotic arm. And at the end of that robotic arm, we have about a 45-kilogram turret with a coring drill. And this drill is meant to actually take core samples out of the rocks on Mars, and eventually pass them inside to the rover, where we have the sample handling system inside the rover, right? And what we do is we actually are able to take the rock samples. They're in tubes once they come back from the core, out of the core, and we're able to put a seal and activate a hermetic seal around that sample tube. And eventually that sample tube will be dropped on the surface of Mars for a future mission to come and pick them up and then bring them back to Earth. And so the sample caching system, as I was mentioning, right, it has this robotic arm that allows us to pinpoint locations on the surface and collect samples. So the sample caching is essentially the acquiring of a sample and storage of it, sealing and storage of it, and have it for a future mission too.
So one of the things I like to point out about that, in terms of what I've seen and read and heard, is those samples, as an example, have to be stored because it's going to be a while before they're able to get them, get them returned here and use them, that type of thing. But the thing I want to point out is that there are a lot of people involved. When I was talking with Anna East last week, she was saying that there were, the team of people that are involved, both for the testing, but also outside of it that contribute to different aspects of this is pretty massive. What can you tell us about some of the things, for example, with your team of the testing? And, you know, I've got a picture of you in the almost looks like a hazmat suit.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about those kind of things.
Yeah. So we actually have, as Anais mentioned, right, there's a large group of subcontractors, not only in vendors of machine shops, but also subcontracts for, like, for instance, the robotic arm, right? That was actually something that we had to subcontract out, right? And so, although we have the expertise, we didn't have the bandwidth to actually build it. So this local company in Pasadena was able to build that with us, in conjunction with us, right? We provide some requirements, and we work with them to get that built. And so, yeah, and then you look at all the payloads, all these science instruments, right? Those are from different universities, or, as you mentioned, RIMFAX, right, from the
UCLA, yep.
UCLA, and we have Arizona State University, right, for the Mastcam-Z, and we have instruments from around the world, right, that are all on this rover. So it is definitely a collaborative and a group effort to get to where we're at.
Sure. One of the RIMFAX scientists is actually in Norway or something.
Yeah.
That coordinated with Dr. Craig
right.
about the device and the particulars of it and that type of thing. Let me go to Dr. Lightsey for a minute from Georgia Tech. Dr. Lightsey, how do you guide students in terms of what direction they may go once they start in your aerospace programs there? Like most freshmen and sophomores, when they get into school, they know they want to do something with space exploration or in the aerospace field, but they're not sure which. And I'm bringing it up for a couple of reasons, because Naia and I, when we were talking briefly yesterday, as I said, she's an aspiring astronaut, but she's just as curious about the unmanned type of missions as well. So let's hear your perspective, Dr. Lightsey, on that.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say that space exploration and building spacecraft is really not just for aerospace engineers. It is incredibly multidisciplinary. Everything is connected. And so there's mechanical, there's electrical, there's computer science, there's systems engineering. So all these things go together. And we can have students from lots, you don't have to be an aerospace engineer to build a spacecraft.
I'm glad you're saying that. I've had people from JPL tell me that on previous shows, that they have people from a lot of different disciplines that aren't necessarily even an engineering discipline. Go ahead.
Yeah, and in our labs, we're really looking for that kind of diversity of skills from students. So we're really building teams of students with lots of different skills. But when you come in as like an undergrad, I think all you need to know is, do you like math and science, and are you interested in aircraft or spacecraft? And that's really enough to get into aerospace. College is really it's a time of trying things and learning. And, some people will find that, yes, that's exactly their passion. That's what they want to do. Some people will learn that maybe they're more interested in something else they didn't know about. And that's perfectly okay. And then we have students that come into aerospace from other disciplines that maybe didn't know about it. So over time, it's a gradual process of specializing. It doesn't happen overnight, and you don't have to come in with like a preformed idea of exactly what you want to do. You will learn about things, and even by the time you get to grad school, what I tell our incoming grad students is, all you really have to know is, do you want to do aircraft or do you want to do spacecraft? By then, you should have enough information to decide sort of which part of the industry you want to go into. But other than that, it's still pretty open. And actually, even one thing we teach is never stop learning, and your career will take you in unexpected directions, and you might end up doing something you never even knew about as a student. But that ability to learn, that kind of lifelong commitment to learning, will take you where you want to go.
Yeah, it's funny. You're echoing the sentiments of Dr. Page last week. He said the exact same thing. Your lifelong learning. That's a good segue to you, who's in the early stages of your lifelong learning. Naia, tell us a little bit about your path. Once you got you got accepted into Embry-Riddle and you started working towards this lofty goal of yours to go to Mars as an astronaut.
Absolutely. Yes.
Listen to her. Absolutely. Sure. I want to go to Mars.
I don't mind.
Have at it. I'm too old.
I think I'm excited for the moon too. That's been a dream of mine, but Embry-Riddle was my starting grounds, and I learned so much there. But I always kind of knew that I wanted to be within the space realm, because when you, I guess, declare your aerospace engineering major, you end up having to choose a track. And there was aeronautics, propulsion, and astronautics, and I took the astronautics route. And so, just like Dr. Lightsey said, I was I was immediately laser focused on space. I didn't really do any of the and I actually envy a lot of people who have that flexibility within themselves to kind of explore everything in aerospace. It's so broad and there's so much to learn. But I've always been super focused on that. And then it wasn't until my sophomore year that I got my NASA Pathways internship. And during my first rotation with them is when I discovered electric propulsion. And I was a sophomore, already kind of had my NASA thing set up. So I was like, okay, what's next? I definitely want to do grad school. And then I discovered electric propulsion and I said, that's what I'm going to study in grad school. And I ended up graduating, coming to Georgia Tech, and now I'm doing electric propulsion here. And I absolutely love it. I really believe that electric propulsion is what's going to take us to the furthest boundaries. It's a very efficient propulsion technology, and I know that it's most desirable for long duration missions. And I believe in deep space exploration. I know Mars is one kind of stepping stool to that, which makes this so exciting because I know we're only going to go further. And I think what I'm doing in grad school right now is going to enable those missions in the future. Mm-hmm.
Very good. You had me captivated there. I lost my train of thought, but anyhow, let me go back to Dr. Lightsey. And Dr. Lightsey, I was going to ask you a couple of questions. One that had to do with your lab and what does that entail? What is the lab all about? A lot of us, when we hear lab, we just think of laboratory, but a lot of times in school, when it's a space lab type of a thing, there's a lot more to it. So if you could tell us a little bit about that and some of the things that you guys focus on with what you teach there at Georgia Tech.
Sure. Well, if you think about sort of modern education and what is engineering education like today, really classwork, I would say it's important. I mean, it's always been important, but I would say the work that you do kind of outside of class now is more important than ever. It's probably, in my mind, it's 50-50. So it's what you study in the class, but also what you do in projects, in team environments, because that's really the environment you're going to be in after you graduate. And so our lab creates that. It's basically a flight project lab. The things we have, the two common themes that happen in our lab is everything we do is space, that's in our title, and everything we do is flight missions. So we want to build things that actually go into space. One of my cliche jokes is if it sits on a table, it's not a spacecraft, right? For it to be a spacecraft, it has to go into space. So we want to teach people how to learn by doing. And so they actually are making these, CubeSats and hardware for flight missions. We're partnered with NASA, just like other universities are on various missions. There's one called Lunar Flashlight that's going to look for ice on the moon. And we're doing that we're helping to enable that by providing a propulsion system for them. So our students come in, they get plugged into these jobs where we rely on the students. I mean, we don't have full-time employees. So our students are filling that role for us, and they get a lot of responsibility early on. They're working directly with NASA or Air Force government, sponsors, and interacting with the engineers in those organizations. Like,
wow, what great experience.
Yeah, exactly. And they come out with years of this experience so that they can contribute really immediately in their career and kind of get going quickly. So that's our goal.
Gotcha. Eric, back to you with the rover that's about to land. what are the things that, with all of the things that you've been doing and the testing, et cetera, and so forth, you're in terms of your area of responsibility, what will you be anxiously awaiting after the 7 minutes of it landing?
So once it lands, it's all about, for me, the sample caching, right? It's getting, deploying our robotic system and actually taking a sample out of the ground, right? I spent about 6 years, thinking about that, right? Working towards that, designing, building, testing.
6 years?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we've we took a concept on essentially a whiteboard, from a whiteboard all the way through to now where we're flying it, right? And we had to develop the technology, we had to put it together, develop the software algorithms that go with it. Remember, this isn't an autonomous system. So
I was going to ask you, so it's going to do some things on its own, but if I understood last week, if I got it correctly, you guys can send updated commands.
Yeah, we tell it what to do. So it's not artificial intelligence, it's autonomy. So we tell it what to do, but then once we tell it what to do, it does that on its own. So It doesn't think for itself, right?
Okay.
But it does do all the work on its own, right? So we tell it, for instance, we'll take images of a rock outcrop, right? And we'll say, okay, the scientists will say, I think I want to take a sample out of that rock, here in the picture. And we can give it a coordinate system to the rover and say, please take, let's take a sample from there. And the rover is designed, and we designed it to be within, I think our requirement is within 3 centimeters of you telling it that coordinate system. It'll actually go and take a rock sample out of there, and it'll do it autonomously. It'll deploy the robotic arm, it'll drill, it'll take the sample, and it will go and store it and tell you that it's done.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a good point that you bring between autonomy and artificial intelligence, because I think sometimes they get blurred or blended.
Yeah, I get
by me as well as anyone else. It's but that's a really good point. Maybe I've watched too many sci-fi movies.
Yeah.
So I'm picturing this rover doing its own thing with its own AI mind. But no, that's a really good point. As I mentioned earlier, and I know this is not necessarily your specific area of expertise, but can you give us any insight about the helicopter? I was looking at some information about it, and it's pretty fascinating because the atmosphere is different there. And so the design of it was very critical in terms of it functioning, but it is a test of a new technology or a drone type of technology that if it works well out there, it's going to really open up a new frontier for exploring the surface of Mars.
Right, as you mentioned, right? It's a you can argue it's a tech demonstration, right? We're demonstrating this new technology on Mars, and yeah, you hit it right on the point, right? There's the atmosphere. It's only 1% of Earth, so it's about 7 torr and pressure out there. So the way you do the lift and the blades on the helicopter have to be different than what you would do normally on Earth. So that had to get obviously designed. The next thing is testing, right? How do we make sure that this is going to work on Mars, right? So we have a 25-foot space simulator. It's about 25 foot in diameter. That's why it's named that. It's also about 80 feet tall.
Okay.
And so in there, they were actually able to create the Martian atmosphere both in temperature and pressure. And then they did use some offload fixtures because they, remember Mars is about 40% gravity to Earth, right? So
right,
everything's a lot lighter, right? So they use these offload fixtures to kind of help get the make sure that they understood the principles of the flight for the the helicopter. And we did a ton of testing in there, right, to make sure that we understood, how does this helicopter work within that atmosphere and under those conditions, right? So it's great, and it'll enable us once on Mars. It's not. I'll say it's obviously part of our mission, but it's not an integral piece of the mission. In other words, we expect it to work just fine and to do its job, but if it was to fail, it's not going to keep us from performing our mission.
Doing everything else that you need to do. Right.
That's right. But it will allow us to, as you get a bird's eye view, right? You fly up a little bit, you now get a little closer view and understanding of what might be around you, and you might make a different decision on where you thought you were going to drive next, right? Versus based on what the helicopter images and then sends back to the rover and obviously down to the ground for us to see.
Yeah. So I again, the information about it was just fascinating. The testing that you just mentioned, and the fact that it really won't fly for a long time. It can fly for short intervals.
Right.
Then it has to kind of recharge.
Yeah.
And the whole power thing that I by the way, I was really showing my age last week when I was talking about like solar power and stuff, and they're like, no, Vince, we have a nuclear power device on the rover, so it can last for a long time. And that was pretty impressive too. Speaking of power and propulsion and that type of thing, I'm going to go back to Naia for a minute, because for one, I think, Naia, you're going to have to break from us like a 20 till or a quarter till.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I want to make sure I have a chance to ask you a couple of more things while you're on. Naia has to go to another Zoom call, so I'm just kidding. Propulsion is something you've mentioned a couple of times and seems like something you're very interested in. So it seems very perfect that you are at Georgia Tech studying there with what Dr. Lightsey just said about what they're working on right now. Why you're interested in propulsion in particular, and what are you hoping to learn with this?
Absolutely. I would say I'm interested in propulsion just because I know that's how we get places. And I know there's so much science to learn in propulsion and the different types of propulsion. With chemical propulsion, I was always interested because the shock factor, it's a big fiery ball. And then I got into electric propulsion because, one, I just thought it was a very interesting and novel technology. And then the other side of it is the fact that it's so efficient that I know that's what's going to drive us, to those long duration missions. And so what I hope to eventually contribute to the industry is optimizing electric propulsion for those long duration space, deep space exploration missions. And
like going to Mars.
Like going to Mars and beyond. I definitely.
Oh, okay. Mars is 7 months. I'm good with that for now. No, I'm kidding. It doesn't matter what I think about it.
No,
that's great. That's quite a thing for your undertaking, I was going to say.
Absolutely. It's there's so much out there within propulsion itself, whether it comes to optimization and even hybrid propulsion. And I just think that that's the most exciting, because that is how we get places. That's our fuel. So,
Dr. Lightsey, can you piggyback on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is great. Naia is a real rocket scientist. So, one of the things she pointed out is the efficiency, and that makes a huge difference for these very far away destinations. Mars is so hard to get to that you have to take a huge amount of propellant for just 1 kilogram of payload. And if you can increase that efficiency by a factor of 10, let's say, that makes a huge difference in terms of the size of the spacecraft and the size of the rocket and how much you can actually get to the surface of Mars. And so when we start to talk about things that are going to require infrastructure, multiple vehicles interacting with each other, maybe building things on the surface, these advanced propulsion techniques are critical. Like we physically cannot do it without them.
Sure. Yeah. Speaking of the things like weight and that type of thing, Eric, I wanted to ask you, when you guys were working on this for the last 6 months, excuse me, did you have to take that in consideration in terms of what materials were used to have the strength to do the digging and sampling and that type of thing, but yet stay within certain guidelines regarding weight?
Yeah, for not only for mass, we had to watch the mass of the rover. We couldn't go. We pretty much had to fit within the envelope of the previous rover, right? We're more or less at the maximum mass that you can put on another planet safely. Where it's not so much, we can always build a bigger rocket. It's not so much getting it there; it's stopping it, right? That's the critical part of all this, right? So the mass and our technology with the EDL and the sky crane and the parachutes and everything is sort of optimized now for the mass that we're able to send. But yeah, we definitely have to watch for the mass when we're designing the sample caching system. So we were given an allocation, if you will, but also we had to watch what materials we use because we are looking for microbial life. There was certain materials that the scientists just said, hey, we don't want you using this stuff because if it chips or if it, as you're working in rocks and
it could contaminate.
It can contaminate or make it look like there's something there that's not really there, right? That we brought.
Wow. So then you have to work really close with the geologists and whatever other specialties.
Absolutely. Yeah. We were, and that was part of the collaboration, right? We had, we were, lockstep with the science community, right? As far as, what we could use. And I sort of joked that, they took the periodic table and said, okay, you can't use all this stuff. And they crossed out a big portion of it. And we said, okay, that makes our job a little harder.
Yeah.
So we had to decide and work towards, how do we manage, not only mass, but also the materials that we're allowed to use, right? And methods. So there was a lot of development that we did as far as making sure we were able to meet everybody's requirements and get there.
Again, it comes back around to that you can be into a lot of different aspects of things in terms of what your interests are, your career goals, and that it's like you can be a geologist or a microbiologist or biologist or whatever, and that applies to space exploration. In fact, it was funny. We had the chair of the human flight stuff at UND, Dr. De Leon, and he was talking about the fact that, well, if you're out there traveling for 7 months to Mars and you get a toothache, who's going to know how to fix it? So you could be a dentist going to Mars. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm probably stretching that, not quite the way he was saying it. But listen, let me ask you this real quick, and I'll, in fact, I was going to come back to you on it. So I'll do this. Naia, I don't want to hold you up from your other call, but as a young lady who is working her way up into a fantastic industry, what recommendations or advice, I should say, do you have for your peers and for those coming up through middle school and high school, for our young audience that's thinking about doing something in aerospace, space exploration, et cetera?
Absolutely. My favorite and most important piece of advice is always mentors. Make sure that you find them. It definitely takes a village to I guess, evolve in this industry. And especially if you're like me, you're first generation college or grad student, that mentorship and just the guidance from people who've been through things that you will eventually get to is invaluable. So definitely find mentors and network to get work.
Any challenges that you recommend on how to navigate that you've had as you've come up?
Absolutely. I've had my fair share of academic challenges. I failed the class in undergrad, and that taught me a lot about how to deal with failure, because I thought that was kind of the end of my career pretty much. And my response to that, the things I learned from overcoming that obstacle was huge. And especially when it comes to science and failure in general, they kind of have to go hand in hand in order to progress. And that is something as a researcher that I'm learning again in grad school, and something that I think is going to be important in my in my path to becoming an astronaut, that perseverance, that grit to overcome those failures, and to basically find solutions fast, because that's what an engineer is, a solution finder, solution maker. So
gotcha. Listen, thank you very much for taking the time to squeeze us in to be on the program with us, and for all of your valuable insight with what you do. We want to wish you the very best with your pursuit of your PhD and being an astronaut. And who knows all of the things that you're probably going to do in the industry. Pretty excited about it and excited for you. So thank you for being with us. Whenever you need to, you can go ahead and drop out. But thanks drop out of the call.
Oh yeah.
But thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. I learned so much from you, Eric, and thank you for your expertise, Dr. Lightsey, and thank you for having me, Vince. This was great.
Thank you,
It's
Naia.
absolutely a pleasure. So we're going to continue the conversation. And, you know, it's a perfect segue to you, Dr. Lightsey. What, with kids that are in, students that are in your programs, and they're trying to find their way, but they may be, you know, they may have some challenges. What do you recommend to them? How do you guide them, or have your, you know, the other professors guide them in terms of moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, challenge is always going to happen, right? I mean, if you're pursuing any goal that is, you know, worthwhile, somewhere along the way, there are going to be setbacks. And it's really about how you respond to challenge that matters as much or more than just getting, you know, having a setback. So, you know, I just tell students to stick with it, to persevere in the spirit of today. You know, really, if you have a long-term commitment to a goal, you know, you're not going to give up on your goal the first time something happens that sets you back. You know, just stay with the motivations that drove you to where you are, and follow through and learn from your experiences. So if something happens that's not what you planned, ask, how did that happen? Why did that happen? What can I do to get better? Right. So that's
Right.
really an improvement process.
Well, and school is a good place to toughen up in, because at space exploration and all things aviation and aerospace really do present their challenges, and you will have, you're gonna, you know, actually sometimes failure is part of the learning process, and you have to be prepared to deal with that.
Yeah, it's going to happen eventually at some level. All of us have experienced failure. So don't worry about it if it happens to you. I mean, it's not something anybody really should enjoy, but it's normal, and how you respond is what matters.
Got you. While I have you, one of the things I haven't done through the since the beginning of the show, how did you get into this? Where did you start? Where are you from, and what was the spark?
Okay, so I'm old enough that I was you know, like 5 years old when the lunar landings were happening. So I actually watched those on TV. I can remember seeing those when they were being broadcast. And apparently, according to my parents, I told my parents I was going to build a hotel on the moon. So when we get to that point, I guess I'll get into the hotel business. But I've just always been really passionate about space. You know, a couple of times I considered other career paths, and in the end, I stuck with what I knew I wanted to do. You know, if you kind of listen to your inside voice, it sort of tells you what you care about, and I've never regretted that. I mean, I think doing the things that you're passionate about is really the secret to happiness.
What did you think you wanted to do before you zeroed in on aerospace?
I don't know. You know, I've always been very math and science oriented. I just thought that was very fascinating. I love kind of the beauty of math, and just learning. So I think those were the things that I started out with an interest in, and then I just gradually became more and more involved in space. And then it was more like, where can I make a contribution? How can I help? Right? What can I do? And then I also really enjoy working with students, and I like explaining things. I gave a seminar, and someone said, you know, you ought to consider that as a career path. And so that's how I ended up where I am.
Yeah. And when was that? When did you zero in on what you were going to probably be doing from that point on?
Or you mean being a professor? Or
yes. Yeah. Well, both actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have kind of a systems background, so I was in guidance and control systems is really where I started, and there's a fair amount of math in that, and that was what appealed to me. But also, when I was in grad school, I gave a seminar to we had like a brown bag series, and I kind of had been learning some things, so I kind of taught a little bit about what I was learning, and that's where people were like, you could be a professor, you should do this. So I didn't do it right away, but I kind of kept that in my mind. And then when the opportunity came along, I figured, well, what the heck, I'll try it. And I've really enjoyed it.
Great. Eric, how about you? Where did things start for you?
Well, I think similar
Where
to
are you from, Eric?
so I'm from Los Angeles. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California.
LA baby.
Yeah, and
Who likes to mess with people about the weather? Let's
Yeah.
pass the weather. Go ahead.
Yeah, and honestly, growing up, I didn't even know JPL existed down the street from me, right? I mean, it was, maybe I grew up probably 15 miles south of JPL. And it wasn't until, I started, obviously, like Dr. Lightsey mentioned, right? Math and science was something that really appealed to me. And so I, eventually thought, what can I do with that? And, electrical engineering was sort of kind of popped up. Like, this is something that I think I could get into. And electronics is everywhere. So I should be able to find a job for sure right after college, right? And aerospace was a passion, but I didn't think I'd get to where I'm at today, right? Where, I sort of came in, after I graduated from college, I actually started contracting with JPL through a different company, working on some avionics and electronics designs. And then that's where I got the, that's the aha moment, right? That's where it says, this is what I like, right? When I stopped, my wife would tell me, hey, sometimes you don't, you stay at work pretty late, what's going on? And it's like, you just kind of, I get into it and I just kind of forget that everything's happening around me, right? And so
you're like, it's legitimate. It's legitimate.
Yeah. Trust me, there's nothing going on. And honestly,
I'm having an affair with a Rover.
That's right. That was the mistress, was the Rover, right? Early on in our marriage, she said, you're coming home kind of late. And I said, yeah, only because I'm married. If I wasn't, I'd probably still be at work just doing this stuff. I go, because I really like it.
That's serious passion, buddy. That's serious.
But I've been able to scale that back a little bit. But no, there are still those days that I'll go into work and again, I kind of forget about that I'm working. It's not, it doesn't feel like work sometimes. So I'm able to, the work that I really obviously really enjoy because I'm not watching a clock, right? And sometimes I do realize that, wow, I've been here, it's 8, 9 o'clock at night and well, maybe I should stop and get dinner. Right.
Yeah.
And so,
that's when you're really into it. What's the atmosphere like in your work environment there? Not just the test, but everything that you do at JPL. What's it like working there?
Yeah, it's actually a very collaborative place, right? I think a lot of people are willing to share information, advice, what did they learn from past projects, because we are our charters to always do something that's never been done before. So we're never in, we did this already. This is how you do it. It's already written down. We're sort of always trailblazing, right? And that's what we're trying to do is advance the technology or advance our understanding of something. And so, sharing experiences, because that's the only way, right? We'll learn is learn from each other and on how, how to build the next thing, how to approach this. What are the gotchas that you ran into before, and how can I apply that to the new stuff so I can get past that and find the next problem, right? And work it that way. So, it's a it's a bit of a cliche, but it's almost like a family, right? We are, we will tend to spend a lot of time together working on stuff, and because we all really enjoy what we do, we may have, discussions or arguments or, very passionate about making sure that the product or whatever we're developing is done well. And because a lot of times we don't get a second chance at it, right? It has to work the first time.
So you've been there 20 years. What would you advise to young people coming into the industry that are maybe like you? They know they have a thing for math and science, and so they're probably looking at maybe something in engineer or in some other aspect of science, but they're not sure what direction they want to go. Getting into space exploration, in your case, unmanned space exploration and aerospace, what would your advice be?
Yes, I think part of it is Dr. Lightsey mentioned it, right? Is you have to really have this passion and enjoy what you're doing, because if you're, if you're constantly watching the clock, when you get to work and you're thinking, well, when am I going to leave? It's probably not the best job for you, right? Because you're not going to put your all into it, right? The passion, I think, is what allows us to do that extra work when we're working. And I like to say, hey, yeah, and don't chase the dollar. Chasing the dollar, maybe you'll find a fancy startup that's going to pay you a lot of money, but you may not enjoy the work that you're doing, and you're just kind of wanting to get out of there, right? And to where if you just enjoy the work that you're doing, it'll come out. Your work will benefit from it, and it'll shine. And so I think it's really just find what your passion is and work towards that, and arguably the money's going to follow. When you start doing really good work, that money will come back in. So it's worry about the work, worry about doing your best job and putting your best foot out there, and then everything else will sort of come into play.
And is the constant learning something that you enjoy too? You find that inspiring?
Oh, yeah, I love that. That's actually one of the parts I really love about my job is I can learn. I learn something new every mission, right? I do have a pretty good understanding across the board on the entire vehicle, but there might be an instrument or some of the science or a particular nuance of the mission that I'm going to end up learning a lot more of, and I can dig right in and start to expand my knowledge base, and that's great.
Dr. Lightsey, you mentioned the community factor earlier. Today's a big day. What are you looking forward to after the landing and as this project continues to develop?
Yeah, well, first of all, the landing is a big deal. We actually have a watch party going on here at Georgia Tech. So
nice.
Everybody's going to be like logging into a big Zoom call, and we're going to kind of watch everything live. So, that's an opportunity to get together and we can't physically be together, but we can gather virtually. But really that is the beginning of the mission, right? I mean, the whole point of being there is all the amazing things we're going to be able to do, the science experiments, the sample caching system is an amazing concept because it's a multi-mission goal, like to actually, it's the first phase of returning something back to Earth. So, maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we will have those samples on Earth. We'll be able to do that. But I'm really excited about just all the discoveries that are going to happen that we don't even know about because we can't imagine, what we're going to see when we get there.
Yeah, exciting. Any parting advice for our young viewers? Or maybe a little solicitation to come to Georgia Tech? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, Georgia Tech is a great school. I mean, there are a lot of great universities. One of the things I really value about the university is just having all the people with different disciplines together and, the sharing that goes on of knowledge and love for learning. So, I hope do what you love. That's the best advice I can give you.
Yeah. Eric, it's still early on your side of things. What's your day going to be like today?
I don't know. Maybe watch some TV. Maybe try to catch a landing or something.
maybe watch a landing.
No, yeah, we're sort of setting up the same way. We have a remote sessions that we're going to log into and watch some of the telemetry come back from the vehicle. So, I actually, I have two young daughters here, and I was able to talk to their teachers and ask them if they can miss part of their day to.
Hey, it's a justifiable absence.
Yeah. So we'll see. So far I got the okay. So we'll see. But yeah, so I'll have my girls here, and actually.
Did you get your wife's okay too?
Yeah. My wife's home too, so she'll be good. So we'll be watching. And cheering on the team. We're now. The Testbed team. We're shadowing, and we actually were shadowing last night, and we landed the spacecraft. So we're now in ready and standby for surface operations, and we'll be watching along with the rest of the team as it comes in. So
That's awesome. I'm so excited for you guys. I'm excited for you. I can't thank you enough for taking time to be part of the program today and sharing all of your insight with what you've done and what you do with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So thank you, and wishing you guys the very best. And Dr. Lightsey, again, thank you for the last minute ad of being able to join us and sharing with us some insight regarding what you do with Georgia Tech and the programs you offer in aerospace, et cetera. You guys make space exploration, a lot of fun, which is what we want our young viewers to understand, that, it's not it's math and science, but it can be a lot of fun too.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks, guys. We're going to call it. I want to thank everybody for watching. And I always forget to remind everybody that this show will be available by tomorrow on demand. So for those of you who may have missed it, you're welcome to, or want to see it again in its entirety, you're welcome to do that. My name is Vince Mickens. I'm with the Private Air Media Group, and this has been All Things Aviation and Aerospace, with a special emphasis on today's fantastic event that's about to happen, I believe at 2:55 p.m. this afternoon, of landing a rover on Mars, the Perseverance and the Ingenuity helicopter, which is where I think people are equally excited about that too. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a great one. See everybody else next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.